Welcome again, Maxim here. Today we are gonna talk about types of damage in Warframe. When we hit enemies, we can see how much damage we deal. It's shown by different colored numbers. They are a result of calculation which consists of many things. Mainly it's about statistics of our weapons and about weaknesses and resistances of our enemies. If you want to discover what kind of damage is effective on specific enemy and which is not, insert codec scanner in your gear wheel. Using them during mission will give you a lot of information about enemies you face and improve you as a warrior. Scanner will mark things that you still need to scan, orange, and green those you don't need to scan anymore. Here is an example of an opponent we already know everything about. Each plus means that this kind of damage will do 25% more damage against this unit, and minus is the resistance of the same value. Maximum value of resistances and weaknesses is 75%. While hitting enemy, we can see that many numbers in different colors are shown around them. Normal damage will be shown as white values, but if they are yellow, orange or red, that means those damage are critical damage. Each weapon has some percentage of chance to deal critical hit. Yellow value means crit of first level. Orange is level 2, 3 and above are red. More about critical damage in some other video, because this topic is little more advanced. Let's focus now on basics. In some situations we can see gray values, which are only zeros. This is an information that we are not hurting our enemy. Sometimes we will also see values in blue and purple. Those numbers mean that we hit in shield, blue, or enemy is buffed by something and we deal damage in overshield, purple. Before we move on, we need to talk about another important aspect, status. When we decide to use some weapons, we need to check their parameters to match the damage per faction we face. The thing is, what kind of damage we will deal, but also how high is status chance on them. Status is an additional effect which is likely to appear with every hit. Almost each kind of damage that players can use have their own status. If we choose to use a weapon that contains more than one type of damage, then we can ask a question, which status it will be if it actually occurs. The answer is simple. I will explain with an example. If we have weapon that has 7 slash damage and 3 puncture damage, status has 70% chance to be a slash 1 and 30% to be a puncture 1. More damage of one type, more percentage of a chance to that kind of damage to become a status. They can stack to improve effects or reset their duration. Status icons are shown above enemy health bar, indicate of its name. Okay, we are ready to talk about individual types of damage. In Warframe, we have 3 types of physical damage: impact, puncture and slash. First one is effective against shields, mainly worn by corpus units, but it's less effective when they are used on flesh. The status effect is stagger and increased chance of mercy kill with Parzon. Subsequent occurrences of the status will stack up to 10 and extend the stagger. Each occurrence has its own duration of 6 seconds. Second physical damage is puncture, very effective against armored and robotic units, but not as good when we are facing enemies with shields. The status effect is weakened. Victim deals 30% less damage over 6 seconds, and each subsequent proc add 5% to that state, up to 75 on 10 stacks. Almost all status effects stack up to 10, except Toxin and Slash. And finally we get to the last physical, slash. It's very effective against flesh, but it's less effective against armored and robotic units. The status effect is bleed. After 1 second from applying it, the target will start to bleed for 6 seconds. On each one it will be damaged with value of 35 modded weapon damage, until the effect is over. Those are dot, damage over time. Bleeding damage is not affected by mods that increase specifically physical damage or elemental. To improve it, we need to use faction mod, for instance Bane of Greeneer, crit mods, but also those that increase overall damage, for instance Serration. It should be mentioned here that the damage the target receives while bleeding is called true damage. It doesn't have any shield, health or armor modifiers and ignore armor damage reduction. It can be applied on enemy by bleed status, by finishers, and Warframe abilities. It doesn't have any kind of status effect and cannot be amplified by any kind of buff. If the value of this damage is not modified by any unique mechanics, such as Warframe skills, then its value will be always the same for different opponents, for instance on different level. All the status listed above can be also applied on the player. They work exactly the same as those applied on the opponent. Now it's time for primary elemental damage. First one is Hit, effective against infested and Grineer units, less effective against proto shield worn by some Corpus units. The status effect is Ignite, that will cause enemies to burn and make them panic. Also their armor will be reduced by 50%. 1 second after ignition, through 6 seconds, each second will cause a tick of damage. Applying more stacks will not boost the dot damage, but it will refresh the ignite duration. When the status is over, armor will come back to regular effectiveness. If the status is applied on a player, he will burn for 6 seconds, take damage every second of 50% of the base weapon damage that set him on fire, and his armor will be reduced by 50%. Next one is Cold, effective against shield and armor, less effective against infested. The status effect is Freeze. It will reduce movement speed and fire rate by 25% for 6 seconds. Next procs will increase it up to 70%. Each proc has its own duration. On player it will cause reduced movement speed and fire rate by 25% for 6 seconds. Another element is Electricity. Great against Corpus robotic units and Grineer machinery, but more worse against armored units. The status effect is Tesla Chain. Stuns enemies in 6 meters range and deals damage through 6 seconds, counting first second as a moment of occurring the status. It can hit different body parts, so it's possible to hit headshots with multiply damage. Additional effect is an electrification which will stun enemies for short duration of time. On the player, the element will deal 50% of base damage to the player and his allies in 3 meters range. Last primary element is Toxin, effective against Corpus flesh because it bypassed their shields. Much worse against robotics, machineries or fossilized infested monsters. Units in range of Toxin Ancient will also be immune to Toxin. The status effect is poison that will start to damage after 1 second after occurring, for next 6 seconds. Each stack will cause separate damage and have its own duration. On player it works just the same. Let's move on to the secondary elemental damage types. We can create them by combining 2 primary ones. If we insert 3 of them in one weapon, 2 of them will combine and create a new one, and the third will remain the same. How they combine is determined by slots numeration. First slot is the top left, now we count to the right, and second row is the same. The 9th slot is called Exilus, and it's for special mods. There is a special tab for them. A different situation is when we put 2 toxic mods and 1 electric mod, and those mods are only elements on weapon. No matter of the order and what mods are between, those 3 mods will always create 1 combined damage. Toxin and Electricity will create new kind of damage, and the second Toxin will join that combination, increasing damage value. If, however, we have for instance weapon that deals cold damage as a base one, and we insert 1 primary elemental mod, it will combine with cold and create new kind of damage. But if we insert 2 different primary elemental mods to that kind of weapon, they will combine with each other. So the weapon will fire new type of damage and also cold damage. Let's start with Corrosive damage, combined from Electricity and Toxin. Very effective against armored and fossilized units. Less useful when we fight Corpus with proto shields. The status effect here is Corrosion. It causes temporary degradation of the enemy's armor by 26% for 8 seconds. Each proc further reduces armor by 6% up to 80% and have its own duration. On player, this status will cause 26% armor reduction for 8 seconds. We can also combine Toxin with Cold. By doing that, we will create viral damage. It's good against corpus and greener bodies, but not that good against light infested units. Heavy ones are even immune to it. The status here is virus. It will amplify damage to health by 100% for 6 seconds, subsequent procs add 25% to that state, up to 325%. Virus will ignore enemy's armor, yet shields are blocking it. On player, it will amplify damage to health by 100% for 6 seconds. Last element we can combine with Toxin is heat. This combination will create gas, effective against light infested units, but it deals lower damage to grenier and corpus bodies. The status effect here is gas cloud that deals a tick of damage to all enemies within a 3 meter radius, that can be increased with each subsequent proc by 0.3 meter, up to 6 meters. First tick is dealt in the same second when applied on the target. Damage value does not scale with elemental mods, only with faction, crit or base damage mods. If the target dies, cloud will remain in the same place until the duration is over. On player, gas work just the same. Moving on, fourth possibility of secondary elements is radiation. We can create it by combining heat and electricity. Very effective against armored and robotic units, or even eidolons. Less effective when we use it against infested or shields. The status effect here is confusion. The enemy will be able to target and damage their allies for the next 12 seconds. It also applies plus 100% damage dealt to allied units. Subsequent procs will reset time of that state, and each proc will increase that damage by 50% up to 550%. Players under this status will have reduced accuracy and will be able to harm their allies for 4 seconds. Next one is magnetic. We can create it by combining cold and electricity. Effective against corpus shields, less effective against armored units. The status effect here is disrupt. It increases damage into shields by 100% and nullifies natural shield regeneration for 6 seconds. Subsequent proc increases that damage by 25% up to 325. Each proc got its own duration. On player, it will increase shields damage by 100%, nullify its regeneration, consume 50 energy per second, and disrupt HUD for 4 seconds. Last secondary elemental damage is blast, combined from heat and cold. Effective against fossilized infested monsters and grenier machinery, but not as good against grenier armored units. The status effect is inaccuracy, reducing target accuracy by 30% for 6 seconds. Subsequent procs add 5% up to 75. Each stack has its own duration. On player, it will reduce accuracy by 30% for 6 seconds. There are 2 more types of damage left, but we can use only one of them. It's called void damage, and I will try to avoid any kind of spoilers, because we gain access to it through main storyline quests. That kind of damage is useful against sentients, because it will nullify any damage resistance developed by those units. The status effect of it is Bullet Attractor, 5 meter bubble that will pull bullets straight to the afflicted target for 3 seconds. Last kind of damage can only be used by sentients. Tau damage is unique and don't have any kind of modifiers against health, shields and armor. Don't have any kind of status effect also. And that's all for today. Those are all kind of damage we can use in Warframe. If you have any questions, ask me in the comments or visit one of my streams, link in the description. See you next time, bye. Thank you for watching, leave a reaction under this video if you liked it or not. I'd like to read your comments as well. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and click the notification bell. I also invite you to visit my Twitch channel, Maxim_land. Streams from Monday till Sunday at 5 PM. See you next time, bye.